In 1995, rock radio needed a change after 4 years of grunge. And that change came in the form of ska. Invented in Kingston, Jamaica in the late 50s, before being repackaged with punk and soul elements as two-tone in the UK in the late 70s. It was an upbeat dance music, characterised by its walking bass lines, accented rhythms, and blasts of horns. Third wave ska originated in California in the late 80s, and Anaheim's No Doubt were instrumental in breaking it into the mainstream. Their 1995 third album was a fizzy cocktail of two-tone, punk, hair metal, disco, and new wave. Frontwoman Gwen Stefani combating her heartbreak, stalkers, and societal condescension to shape generational anthems and permanent radio ballads. Sobbing and skanking in equal measure, this is the story of how No Doubt and Tragic Kingdom sold ska to the world. Despite how things felt in 1995, No Doubt didn't appear out of nowhere with instant success. Their 8 years previous had been dogged by false starts and tragedy. Early in the 80s, a teenage Eric Stefani had brought home an import 7-inch from UK independent label Stiff Records, Baggy Trousers by Madness.
But did it really turn out bad? All I learned at school was how to spend not break the rules.
Growing up in the shadow of Disneyland in Orange County, California, it would be his and his sister Gwen's first exposure to ska, an obsession that would dominate their young lives. In December 1986, while working at a Dairy Queen, Eric would meet Bad Brains devotee John Spence and decide to form a ska band of their own, Applecore. It featured Spence as frontman, Eric on keyboards, and after a bit of goading, his sister on backing vocals. Eventually, they changed their name to a favourite catchphrase of Spence, No Doubt.
There's no doubt in my mind that you're like the other kind.
John didn't really sing. He yelled and screamed and did these backflips, and I was like his little sidekick. Originally, No Doubt was just a bunch of people who didn't know how to play their instruments, trying to imitate the music they loved, which was ska.
No doubt.
Their energetic back and forth between Spence and Gwen quickly gained No Doubt a following in the underground Orange County ska scene. These shows were juggled with school and Gwen's 11 o'clock curfew. Soon she would start a relationship with bassist Tony Kanal. Though not wanting to impact the band, they at first kept their romance hidden from the rest of the group. These worries quickly became inconsequential when in December 1987, a year into the band, Spence took his own life. They had planned to play an industry-packed show at the Roxy 4 days later, what was expected to be their breakout show. Instead, it became their final performance, played in tribute to Spence's memory. However, the breakup was short-lived. Not long after the Roxy gig, the band reconsidered, feeling in their hearts that continuing would be what Spence would have wanted. Over the next few years, No Doubt would become one of the bigger ska bands in Orange County, still resolutely underground but pulling sold-out crowds and playing shows with the likes of the Untouchables, Fishbone, and the pre-Mother's Milk Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Hey, my farm, what the hell is wrong with y'all?
But this didn't always equate to respect from those around them. We were always the dork band from Anaheim. We were never cool enough or tough enough, because we grew up in Orange County with all those punk bands. We played with them, but I always felt like Shirley Temple, just this little lollipop out there, and I could never have a really raspy or loud screaming voice. We just never fit in. The band had scrounged up enough money to record an album, but decided to re-record it when they signed with the newly established Atlantic Records imprint, Interscope, in '91. Label co-founder Jimmy Iovine had caught sight of No Doubt live and noted Gwen's potential, commenting that in 5 years she'd be a star. It wasn't a scientific insight or anything. They were young. I knew they needed a lot of work. 5 years was just a figure. Problem was that their hyperactive ska was not what people wanted to hear in 1992. Rock radio was all about the oh-so-serious, distorted sounds of Nirvana, Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. When they inquired whether they could get played on Los Angeles' alternative station, K-Rock, the response was, it will take an act of God for this band to get on the radio. As such, despite being on a major label, their debut sold a mere 30,000 copies. Things were not looking good for No Doubt. After touring the continental United States a couple of times in between college, No Doubt came back and wanted to start work on album number 2. However, Interscope was non-committal. From March 1993, the band was sporadically booked into studios, wherever Interscope could get a cut rate. As such, the album was recorded piecemeal over almost 2 years, and 11 different studios around Los Angeles. Simply, in the current climate, No Doubt were a poor investment. We were writing and writing, but Interscope was being really wishy-washy about letting us go in the studio. Things just kept getting dragged out. It was a really hard time. We were working, writing, attending school, trying to use up time. But every day we're calling up and going, when can we go in? When? Frustrated with the lack of real support, the band put their follow-up for Interscope on hold and built their own ramshackle studio at the house Eric had inherited from his and Gwen's grandparents. Over a long weekend they recorded their actual second album themselves, the Beacon Street Collection. And despite the fact that it was only sold in local record stores and at shows, the album quickly sold its initial run of 1,000 copies. While the album's success rekindled Interscope's interest, not all their attention was welcome. In an attempt to shape their new material into a more commercial direction, Interscope set up No Doubt with former 80s one-hit wonder Matthew Wilder of Break My Stride fame as producer. Up until this point, No Doubt's main songwriter had been Eric, but intervention from Wilder and the label, alongside a dislike for touring, made him stop showing up to practices, despite them taking place at his house. I like to create, but touring is too loud with too many people. It's too much. I'd rather be somewhere peaceful. It takes peace and quiet to write a good song. That's what the guys in Oasis say. Though he'd already written several tracks for the album, including the Andrew Lloyd Webber meets Oingo Boingo title track, sometime in 1994, Eric would leave No Doubt to work full-time as an animator for The Simpsons, a role he'd previously kept while fitting around the band. And to compound the succession of personal tragedies, after 7 years together, Canal broke up with Gwen. Being that it had been the first relationship for both of them, the split was particularly hard, with Gwen swinging between periods of laying face down on her bed, listening to Elvis Costello's Almost Blue on repeat,
Almost blue,
and refusing to believe that they were no longer a couple. When we broke up, I still forced Tony to kiss me. I was in denial. I might have lost the title of girlfriend, but in my eyes we were still together. For like a year, he didn't have to come to my house when I demanded it. He didn't have to do anything. But when he felt like it, I was there. It was horrible. During this period of uncertainty, No Doubt nearly split. Investing 8 years in the band and having only achieved poor sales and mockery from the Orange County scene, the band's position seemed hopeless. Now in their mid-20s, maybe it was time, like Eric, to get real jobs. But this adversity was also motivating. Eric leaving allowed for a more democratic process of songwriting. Everyone had ideas, and then they'd bring them to the house. I remember writing Sunday Morning, and Gwen wasn't feeling well that day, and I had an acoustic guitar and started singing Somebody's Feeling Quite Ill, and that became Sunday Morning.
Sappy, pathetic little me.
Helped by the diverse tastes of the band members, instead of the circus ska of their first 2 albums, their sound evolved to take on a variety of genres. There's the Motown stomp of Sunday Morning,
I thought I knew you.
the metal guitar of 16, and the out-and-out disco of You Can Do It. However, the out-of-control rollercoaster punk of Excuse Me Mister was contentious, at least to Wilder's ears. Our producer wanted us to play it, almost kinda like a country shuffle, and so we gave it a shot. We later decided that we didn't really like that, but the other version was erased from the tape. We had to go back in. It must have been months later. We re-recorded it the way we used to play it. Interscope fought them every inch of the way, to the point that when they were not allowed to re-record Excuse Me Mister in its original punkish guise, the band held the ultra-catchy Spiderwebs hostage, refusing to record it until the label stopped meddling. One of the reasons this record took so long to come out is that we withstood a lot of pressures, and we were unwilling to compromise on a lot of things. Tragic Kingdom is a battleground. It was the outcome of 3 years of struggle. But the most significant change, no doubt, was lyrical. Gwen, who had spent her whole time in the band singing from Eric's point of view, was now required to write and sing from her experiences, from a much more personal place. And given her previous year, she had a lot to say. Before, I was really passive. All I cared about was being in love with my boyfriend. I didn't have any creative power. Nothing. I don't know that person anymore. But I'd been really bad at school and didn't know what I would do. I just sang in my brother's band. But after the breakup, I just started writing all these songs. And suddenly I was, oh, I think I'm really good at this. Preceding the launch of Tragic Kingdom by a month, Just a Girl would be the album's first single, released in September 1995. The song's lyrics play on Stefani having spent her time in the band surrounded by men,
Don't you think I know exactly where I stand?
and often feeling infantilized because of her gender.
This world is forcing me to hold your hand.
I wrote that because my dad got mad at me for going to Tony's house and driving home late at night.
'Cause I'm just a girl, I'd rather not be.
I mean, come on, I'm like going on 30 here.
'Cause they won't let me drive late at night.
I wouldn't trade being female, but I really don't think guys understand what a burden it can be sometimes. The title itself was a phrase that Stefani found incredibly funny.
Oh, I'm just a girl, already at my G.
How she was frequently patronized and minimalized because she is just a girl.
So don't let me have any rights.
But as that feeling of being judged and thought less of is universal between women, she was able to survey her female friends and sister for similar stories to solidify her lyrics.
Oh, am I making myself clear?
Coming in the aftermath of darker, heavier material by Hole, L7 and Babes in Toyland, as well as the girls to the front feminism of Riot Girl, Just a Girl offered a less openly confrontational, but still feminist perspective.
I'm just a girl in the world.
One that captured the hearts of millions of teenage girls.
That's all that you'll let me be.
It was never going to be Rebel Girl.
Rebel girl, you are the queen of my world.
It was Girls Just Want to Have Fun, revised for the 90s.
Poverty, we're not the fortunate ones, and girls, they wanna have fun.
Alternating between Cyndi Lauper wails to baby talk, emphasized the frustration at how she was always treated. The barely disguised sarcasm of Just a Girl would strike a chord. Sad and angry songs make people feel good. Maybe I'm not as hard and tough a girl as Courtney Love, and I'm not singing about heroin or whatever, but this is my life, and if you can relate, cool. Let's hang out, let's have fun. Despite what the station had told them years earlier, Just a Girl was soon playlisted on K-Rock. Its punch-to-the-face energy was not only a much-needed, female-fronted radio rock song, but also in line with the slowly bubbling over Californian third-wave ska movement. Earlier in 1995, Rancid had an alternative radio hit with Time Bomb.
Black coat, white shoes, black hat, Cadillac, yeah. The boys are time bomb.
And Sublime were also starting to get traction. However, second single Spiderwebs would embody this sound better. As Just a Girl was written musically with the Cars and Devo in mind.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
The funny thing is that Just a Girl is not even close to ska. It's more of a new wave thing. I don't know if people are throwing us in with the Rancids. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Rancid, but our song is actually more like Weezer. Around the time when Just a Girl first started getting played on local stations, No Doubt played at a Virgin Megastore at Costa Mesa. Stefani drove there with her mother, who asked her daughter to refrain from cursing on stage, as a lot of the Stefani clan were attending. At the time she agreed, tried her best to stem her foul language during the show, before realising that her mother wanted her to be the same polite, submissive, agreeable girl that she was actively defying with Just a Girl. The resultant sweary outburst made it so that her mother stopped speaking to her for a week. Even as Gwen left the tour in tears, her mother still maintained the silent treatment. The narrative thread of Stefani and Kanal's breakup weaves right through Tragic Kingdom. The flustered desperation of Excuse Me Mister. The fragile acceptance of End It On This. And the I'm Over You taunting of Happy Now. I was like, I can't keep writing about the same thing. But I gotta write about what's in my head. And that's the only thing on my mind. But the song that would epitomize the split started off not being about the split at all. Though still written with Kanal in mind, Don't Speak was originally about the predictable familiarity of a long-term relationship. But after they broke up, the words didn't ring true anymore. Eric and I went into the garage, stubbornly, and very irritated about the situation, and sat down and rewrote the verses and lyrics. It used to be a more upbeat, more of a 70s rock type thing.
You and me, we used to be together.
When Tony and I broke up, it turned into a sad song.
Every day together, always.
Don't Speak shows her feelings at their most raw and unfiltered. Mostly the feeling of not wanting to believe what has happened. The chorus's concluding line was changed from
So please stop explaining, it's nothing new that I've heard.
to the more quietly devastating.
I don't need your reasons, don't tell me 'cause it hurts.
The way that I wrote it, you could really just relate to the denial in the song.
And if it's real, well, I don't want to know.
I'm basically saying, don't tell me that, because I already know it. But if you say it, it's gonna crush me.
Don't speak, I know just what you said.
Again, musically, Don't Speak is not ska. The 70s rock ballad comparison not helped by the first few notes having more than a passing relationship to the opening notes of Aerosmith's Dream On. The song Solo, a Spanish classical-inspired piece, was achieved by resolutely non-standard means. The studio version cut and pasted together from 6 different takes. I was thinking about how any true classical players would have hated the way I did it. I played it with a pick, a huge no-no. For most of the world, Don't Speak would become the 3rd single of Tragic Kingdom in April 1996, with Interscope feeling that it didn't best represent the band. There was no physical release in the US. As such, it was invalid for the Billboard Hot 100, instead topping the radio airplay chart for 16 weeks, a record at the time. It also went number 1 in 16 different countries, including the UK. Despite a lot of their main influences being from England, the UK press didn't know what to do with No Doubt. The NME tried to convince their readership that they were the first American Britpop band, being that Blur and Supergrass was simply taking from Madness, The Specials and The Jam. Meanwhile, Kerrang pinballed between calling them a blondie for the 90s to slaughtering Don't Speak in print. Mere words cannot describe how abysmally gutless and sugar-smothered it is. Much like an anteater with a punctured snout, No Doubt suck badly. Canal, for the most part, hadn't minded that his former beau had written so many songs focusing on the hurt he had inflicted on her. That was until the world's press kept asking him about it. What had he done to make Gwen so sad? Alongside this, audiences would train their eyes on him during performances of Don't Speak, in the hopes that he'd crack. We were on tour for Tragic Kingdom for 28 months. We were going through the breakup, and in every interview we were talking about it. So we're opening this wound on an hourly basis. It was so brutal, but I don't know how we made it through. When he wasn't painted as a villain, he was merely a faceless background player, what the NME had dubbed a sleeper bloke, after the 3 less important members that backed up Louise Wenner in the Britpop group Sleeper. It was a fate assigned to all the members of No Doubt who weren't Stefani. She was the one that the music press were interested in, the focus of interviews, photo shoots, and magazine covers, and it started to wear on the group dynamic. I understand it intellectually, but I just feel like I'm second class. I'm shit compared to her. I feel like I'm just a lesser person. I don't look as good, and I'm not as bitchin' as she is in everyone else's eyes. I think a certain part of me, the reason I wanted to be a rock star when I was a kid, I thought that would be a way for people to like me, and now that I get here, I'm not getting the payoff that I was always expecting. These mumbles of discontent over this continual snubbing would be addressed head on with the video for Don't Speak. Instead of focusing on Stefani and Canal's breakup, it dramatized the band on the verge of splitting, with the intention that this awareness of the situation would act as band therapy. In the video, Canal, guitarist Tom DeMont, and drummer Adrian Young look increasingly fed up as Stefani gets all their attention, scowling as photographers shepherd them out of setups and crop them out of photos. We weren't in a situation where we really had to act. Despite the various personal cataclysms, No Doubt made it through Tragic Kingdom. When the band left Orange County in late October 1995, they were expected to tour for 2 months, but the tour went on for 2.5 years, where they evolved from small clubs to theatres to arenas, circling the globe 3 times. Buoyanted by 7 singles, Tragic Kingdom topped the Billboard 200, sold more than 16 million copies worldwide, gained diamond certification in both the US and Canada, and became one of the best-selling rock albums of the 90s. Not only this, but the immense success of Tragic Kingdom helped usher in the next big musical trend, third wave ska. Though the album's 2 biggest hits skirted drumming on the offbeat, skanking guitar and horns, Spiderwebs and Sunday Morning.
I'm walking in the spider webs. So leave a message and I'll call you back.
Alongside their previous material meant that, in the press at least, they were considered a ska band, therefore spreading awareness of the form. Alongside fellow Californian ska punks Rancid and Sublime, as well as Boston's The Mighty Mighty Bosstones, they would bring the sound to the mainstream. This provoked a record label gold rush, with majors signing any band with a horn section, in the hopes of securing their own, no doubt.
Is what I got. I said, remember that.
But I just don't know how to get there.
Keep us from saying anything. Can't separate from everything. Never had to knock on wood, but I know someone who has.
When I am down and I am blue, all I have to do.
Here in your bedroom, I can turn my head on. Sell out with me, oh yeah. Sell out with me tonight.
A lot of people even think that Real Big Fish's 1998 song, She's Famous Now, about her former lover going off to be a star, is actually about Gwen Stefani.
She used to be my girl, but now she's famous.
This was not helped by Aaron Barrett saying so as a joke on Our Live Album is Better Than Your Live Album.
This song's about me and Gwen Stefani and our lost love.
However, for the record, it is not about her. Of third wave ska's infiltration of the mainstream, Save Ferris guitarist Brian Mashburn said in 1997. If you told me 2 years ago that I'd have 2 songs on the radio, I would have laughed. But the climate changed and allowed ska to filter into the mainstream. And I'd be kidding myself to think we got here all by ourselves. The bands that came before us, including recent ones like No Doubt, helped pave the way for the next set of ska-influenced bands. Third wave ska would be an important pendulum swing from the seriousness of early 90s grunge, but it would soon veer back to po-faced anger with Korn, Deftones and Limp Bizkit later in the decade. Outside of ska, No Doubt and especially Gwen Stefani would impact the next generation of artists. Pop-wise, there are defiant Just a Girl style assertions from Avril Lavigne, Pink, Lily Allen, Katy Perry, Marina and the Diamonds, and Miley Cyrus. However, the clearest example of Stefani's influence is Paramore's Hayley Williams, both becoming a figurehead of pop-infused versions of the boys club rock genre of the day, with their iconic neon-dyed hair. As well as being used in the films Clueless, Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion, and Captain Marvel, Just a Girl would be reimagined by Florence and the Machine for Showtime's 90s set thriller drama Yellow Jackets in 2023.
I'm exposed, and it's no big surprise.
This song especially had a huge impact on me growing up, so I was thrilled to be asked to interpret it in a deeply unsettling way for the show. We tried to really add some horror elements to this iconic song to fit the tone of the show. And as someone whose first musical love was pop punk and Gwen Stefani, it was a dream job. After releasing 2000's Return of Saturn, 2001's Rocksteady, and playing the Super Bowl in 2003, No Doubt would take an extended hiatus. Here, Stefani would embark on a continuously successful solo career and teach the world to spell bananas. But Tragic Kingdom is where she was most iconic. Stefani traversed a battlefield of misfortunes, any one of which could stop a band in its tracks. Kicking back against label disapproval, casual sexism and heartache, transformed that negative energy into a run of inescapable hit singles that remain as relevant today as they were in 1995. Thanks for watching. What was your favourite third wave ska band? Comment down below. If you like this video, like, subscribe, and why don't you also do me a favour and share it with a couple of people. It really does help. As always, I'd like to shout out this month's new supporters over on Patreon. Daniel Nittikin, Nacho Mama, Paul Smith, and Michael Hall. Thank you, and thanks to all that support me. And I'll see you in 3 weeks' time for a little libertine and a real cuckoo.